fans, welcome back to Room 237 as I continue my marathon of Italian horror and Giallo films. And I've got a really interesting one that I was actually quite surprised about. But like my previous review, which was A Quiet Place in the Country, that I wasn't quite sure whether to call it Giallo or not. This is another one of those. And it's 1971's The Fox with the Tail... Fox with a Velvet Tail, excuse me. And yeah, this does kind of look more like a James Bond type cover. And this is the Blu-ray from Mondo Macabro. They're putting out some good releases. I mean, there's this Perversion Story, which I've reviewed, is from them on November 9th, coming out with The Designated Victim, which I'll be picking up. Now, it was directed by Jose Maria Fork, if I pronounced that correctly, which this is an Italian-Spanish co-production, similar to The Fourth Victim. And it stars Analia Gade, Gene Sorrell, who I really like, Rosanna Yanni, Tony Kendall, Maurizio Benuglia, and Giulio Pena. Which Gene Sorrell, of the films I've seen him in, this is kind of a turn for him, which I'm not going to get into just yet. But, you know, some of my favorite films of his being Short Night of Glass Dolls, Perversion Story, and his kind of character and performance in those, and what he does in this, it's kind of a nice turn for him, and I think he did a good job with it. Now, it was written by, of course, there's no real credits on these. Oh, and the original title, I believe it's the Spanish title, is In the Eye of the Hurricane, which, actually, I want to get those details correctly. It's also known as Lusty Lovers in the UK, or it was released theatrically in the UK as Lusty Lovers. But in English, I guess over here it was released as In the Eye of the Hurricane. But in, I think, Spain and Italy, it was known as The Fox with a Velvet Tail. Or it might actually be vice versa. But anyway, which In the Eye of the Hurricane is very close to In the Eye of the Eye of the Labyrinth, which I've reviewed. It's also close to In the Folds of the Flesh, which I really would like to get. I'm having a hard time finding that one. But also, The Fox with the Velvet Tail is very close to the Argento Animal titles, which, you know, 1971, I think all three of his animal films, or title films, were out by then. Because I think Cat and Four Flies came out both in 71. Oddly enough, being 1971 in the post-Argento era with an animal title, it's more akin to the pre-Argento 60s, more like the Carol Baker era of Giallo, with the high society kind of following a heroine and mostly dealing with insurance or inheritance. And the weird thing about this is it's not really a murder mystery. In fact, there's really one murder that happens in the entire film, and it's towards the end, and it's not even the main target of the film. In fact, the whole story is, you know, these attempted murders on our heroine named Ruth, played by Analia Gade. And it's pretty much who's doing it and why, I guess, is the mystery. But, and so I don't really know if I can call this Giallo. The weird thing about it is Troy Howarth does do a commentary on this Blu-ray, but he doesn't have it in volume 1, which is where it would be if it was in here, of his Giallo encyclopedia. But it is in volume 3, which is Giallo-inspired films around the world, which means not real Giallo, but inspired films. Everywhere else calls it a Giallo. It is Italian. It has familiar Giallo actors and tropes. This might be the one film I might have to put Giallo or add to my Giallo playlist. Also, another thing is I really enjoyed this film. I thought this was a well-written, well-executed film, and there's no Wikipedia. There's not really much about this film online, which is kind of sad. I mean, this film does deserve more recognition, especially the end. The end has a really good payoff that I didn't really see coming. I mean, I could see it coming, but not the way it panned out and how the writing was going to help that. But, yeah, I thought this was a very well-executed film, and to be honest, the music, I don't know why I said to be honest, that's usually when you say something that's unpopular, but the song in the opening, normally, if it's not Della Orso, if I remember her name right, the one that collaborates with Morricone, the one that actually does vocals. Usually outside of her, I don't really like songs. Just a lot of the choice of songs for Gialli, I'm not the biggest fan of. For some reason, I always think of like that Nightmare song from Naked You Die, but I actually like the opening title song from this movie. But yeah, I think this movie does deserve more recognition. I thought this was very surprising, and like A Quiet Place in the Country, this is one that pays off more the less you know about it. And the story's pretty simple. I mean, we have this married couple, Ruth and Michelle, which Michelle is the husband. It kind of answers how to pronounce Michelle Soavi's name, director of The Church, and he appeared in Demons. I always called him Michael. I thought it was just spelled differently. I guess it's Michelle, spelled the same way as the husband in this, which the husband was played by. The husband looked really familiar. Oh, and also the fact that Gene Sorrell is in here also helps it feel like a Carol Baker 1960s pre-Argento Giallo, as he was in A Quiet Place to Kill by Umberto Lenzi. He was in, I believe he was also in Orgasmo. I could be wrong about that. But let's see who the husband was. Which he's credited as Miguel, which doesn't seem right at all. The subtitles and the audio say Michelle. Let's see, known for nothing I'm really recognizing. There's a movie called Corleone. That's actually pretty cool. He was in a movie called Oil that I keep seeing popping up from 1977. I don't think it's based on the same book that There Will Be Blood is based on. Yeah, maybe he just looks familiar, because I'm not really seeing anything I'm familiar with horror, thriller, or Giallo related. But she tells him that she wants a divorce, and it's because she found someone else. This guy named Paul, played by Gene Sorrell. And they're going out to, I think it's their vacation home, or Michelle and Ruth's vacation home out on the coast. And I mean, she even brings Paul in the house and gets all giddy and excited and hugs and kisses him in front of Michelle when Paul comes in. And Gene Sorrell as Paul, I guess, is the dream guy. I mean, he's incredibly sweet and nice and affectionate to her. He's full of surprises, like when they get to the vacation home, she goes up to take a bath. The bathtub's full and there's a live swan in there. And keeps taking, like, he rents out this club. They got the whole club to themselves. Just seems incredibly romantic, and she's incredibly happy. At one point, they're even laying in bed, either in bed or by the fireplace, after having sex, and she's telling how she's afraid of this happiness. And I guess her and Michelle got divorced because they just grew apart. It's Paul kind of makes a comment like, is it because he's filthy rich? She says he didn't have a cent to his name when they met and got married. There's even, and just to take kind of a break here, side note, imagine if I did this every time I made a side note, like parentheses that are unneeded. Imagine how annoying that would be. I'm not going to do this for commas either, but I see it in the comments. People complete their sentences with parentheses. It's like, that's not how you use parentheses. Kind of a pet peeve, but stylistically, there's not a whole lot, but there is some interesting camera work. I mean, there's this, some of it is with scenes that drag on. Like when they first get to the property, he's climbing a tree and he kind of drops down, and they do this upside down Spider-Man kiss that goes on forever. I mean, the camera goes around them, it shows them caressing each other while he's upside down. It goes on forever, but the way the camera spins, it does have a nice flow to it. It does have a couple cuts, but it's mostly just like this spinning kind of tracking shot, if you can call it a tracking shot. I do like the colors of the club when they're in the club. I want to say during the dance scene, there was kind of a Carrie moment, like when Carrie and Tommy are dancing, only it doesn't go as fast. But then things start happening. She takes his car into town, and the brakes don't work. And she's going really fast. It's on there's like cliff sides, but she doesn't wreck. And then he takes her out scuba diving and hunting for octopus. Her oxygen tank fails or gives out or is empty. It's faulty. And she starts to think that someone is plotting to kill her and to make it look like an accident. And she seems to think that it's Michelle, that he's angry and jealous, and he's come back almost Cape Fear style. But the thing about it is, you get the twist about halfway through the film, and then it's sort of her reaction and how she gets out of it for pretty much the second half. And there's another kind of twist at the very end, which is how she resolves it. There are some supporting characters. There's Paul's friend Roland, who always seems to be around. Like he's the one that gives them their drink and the keys in the club and tells them to have fun. And when she asks Paul if he's the owner, he's like, I don't even know. If it is with stolen money. And then he's cleaning their pool. He's mostly kind of he kind of just sits and watches things happen. Um, there's also this one woman that keeps appearing. We see her in a store, like she's about to pick up this big like sun hat, but then Ruth comes over and kind of takes it, and puts it on, and buys it. And then when they're out um, scuba diving, she's laying in the sun uh, along the rock side, and she's like watching them. She does play a bigger part later. There's also the butler, um, and then at one point, Michel does show up, and he seems desperate to kind of get her back. Like he's still in love with her, and she's completely uninterested. But by this point, she's kind of on edge. Like, who is doing this crap to me? Because what makes it even less obvious is, like, when she's in the car, Paul was going to take her out to lunch. And then just as they're about to leave, he gets a phone call, and it's like a really important phone call. It's going to take a while. So he tells her to go ahead, and that's when the brakes are bad. And then, you know, he's the one that gives her the oxygen tank in the boat. And he tells her where the octopus is, which is like in this underwater cavern, an area where it would be hard to get out of if you had to. So is he doing it? Is it Michel? Is it coincidence? That's pretty much the main mystery for the first half. And I thought it was kind of well done. I was curious to see where it would go. Of course, we find out shortly after. But there's also this cool, stylish scene where when Michel shows up, Paul has Ruth's pistol. There's a scene when they're in the bedroom together, and he reaches for her cigarettes in the nightstand, and he feels a pistol. And she says that Michel bought it for her for when she stayed there alone. So the next day, Paul and Roland are shooting at these tennis balls that are lined up on a fence. They shoot, toss it to the other person, they shoot, and you don't see or hear them reload at once. So how many bullets does this tiny little, like, pea shooter pistol hold? And Michel kind of takes note of how good of a shot he is. So he stands up and he holds up this magazine, and he says, "How about a bullseye?" And you get this long, tense, sort of like it cuts from Paul's face to Roland looking back and forth between the magazine and him. Ruth's reaction, and then Michel's face in the magazine. But when it shows Michel in the magazine, it goes like back and forth. So it's like boom, 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 boom. And it keeps going faster and almost getting closer. Up until it's just Michel and the magazine, and it's going back and forth like this fast, and then phew. And then we kind of get like Michel's POV. So like, it looks like he's holding the magazine like this, and then he like turns it either this way or that way, and there's a bullet hole right in the forehead of the woman on the cover. But when he turns it, it shifts the focus through the bullet hole, which is Ruth. I thought that was a very neat shot with how that was done. But then, you know, Jean Sorrell, or Paul, seems a bit jealous that Michel is around. He thinks maybe she's playing him, and maybe she wants to spend time with him. Maybe she's on the rebound. So he seems a bit jealous. And she asks to be alone, but then she feels bad because there's this mask that he keeps wearing when he's being playful. And she's looking at it, feels bad. And when she goes out to apologize to him, he's not in his bedroom. And she hears something going on outside. That's where I'm going to stop and say spoilers, even though it's about the halfway point. But I thought this was quite a well-done movie. I mean, it looks good. It's well acted. You know, especially Gene Sorrell. I always really enjoy seeing him. It does have its good twists and turns. I mean, even though the plot seems like it's going to take obvious directions, um, there are enough breadcrumbs and hints to multiple different uh, outcomes, which makes Giallo great. Again, this can be considered a Giallo, but yeah, I do recommend this. It is slow for about the first half hour or so, but this is a good character driven. You really get to know these characters and their scenarios, and you really get to see pretty much what this relationship goes through throughout the course of the film. So, and I think this movie does deserve more recognition. I was pleasantly surprised by this. So yeah, definitely check out The Fox with a Velvet Tail. But with that, I'm going to get into spoilers, So as she's going out to apologize to Paul, and she sees that he's not in his room, she hears some people talking outside, and she comes up to a window and she sees Paul, Michelle, and the woman that keeps popping up from time to time, watching them as they were scuba diving. And she's like laying with her head in Paul's lap, and they're talking about all the accidents that have happened so far. And which there's even a scene earlier where Michelle and Paul sit her down and explain how, Michelle couldn't have cut the brake lines, Paul could not have rigged the air tank. They're all just coincidental accidents, essentially. But you hear that they're in cahoots together. Michelle hired Paul to make her death look like an accident so that he could collect her life insurance before they got divorced. And the woman that keeps popping up is named Daniela, which she looked familiar as well. I know I've seen her before, even if she was just a background character in those films as well. Rosanna Yanni. Whoa, she looks super different in that. Oh, that's not her. Let's see. Fangs of the Vampire. Of course, on IMDb, on this, you don't get the full titles when you're just scrolling. Has a lot of credits, but not really anything I'm familiar with. What is that? Count Dracula's Great Love. She was in that. That's a title I keep seeing pop up quite a bit. So she's been in other films. And basically, Paul and Michelle are giving each other crap for almost blowing each other's cover at certain points. And then they come up with this new idea, which is they're going to drive Ruth to suicide, which is essentially inviting Dan, something about convincing her that there's adultery. I think he says between Paul and Daniela. And then it's going to get to the point where Ruth's going to be super depressed and she's going to shoot herself. But the alibi is going to be that he's going to be diving for octopus, and Daniela's going to be his alibi, or she's going to put a suit on as well and pretend to be him out in the water, or they were going to make her death look like a suicide. But whatever the finer details are, that's their plan. But of course, she hears all of this. So then it's, how does she make it through this ordeal? And again, this is what I mean by it's a good turn for Gene Sorrell, because even though I haven't seen all his movies or all of his Gialli, he is the good guy in both Short Night of Glass Dolls, Perversion Story. Especially Perversion Story. He's a guy you really feel sorry for. Here he's taking a villainous role. And I think he's, he definitely seems like he's reveling in it. He's having fun with it. He is kind of, even though this came out before Last House on the Left, there is a point in the story where him and Daniela kind of are Last House on the Lefting Ruth, like taunting her and just being cruel. It doesn't get to full-on rape, but they are taunting her. And you can tell he's having fun with it. But, so yeah, it's kind of like seeing Edwidge Fenech do all of her, her victim roles, and then watching Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Had the Key, where she does have a sort of villainous or morally questionable character, and you can tell she's having fun with that too. So she's kind of being distant. You can tell Paul is kind of getting more and more agitated, or he's acting more agitated because Michelle's not leaving and he's acting like the jealous boyfriend. But eventually she sends him into town to buy supplies because she makes and paints these little things of pottery. Makes a big batch of them, then sells them. So she sends him to town with a list of all these different supplies that she needs, including all these different kind of chemicals and compounds that she needs. And then right before Michelle leaves, they have a toast. Michelle has a toast, makes a toast, and then he leaves. But then there's a phone call that Michelle was killed, which actually it sets the whole thing in motion because it does the whole thing with diving and, making it look like he's diving, but then Daniela puts the scuba suit on and he rushes back to the house. He puts the black glove on, he sneaks in where she's in bed. Just as he's about to pull the trigger, she knows that he's there. She does fill out the suicide note, but it's more addressed to Paul, saying, I know who you are, I know what you're about, I know what you've been trying to do. Then just as he's about to pull the trigger, the phone rings. She answers it, and Michelle has died in a car accident, which they say has been kind of weird. It's kind of a weird accident. But also, before that, Paul dumps the rest of the martini that they all toasted out, and his German Shepherd comes up and licks the ice cubes, which, when they get back, he finds that the dog's dead. He's been poisoned. Which the scene when he buries the dog on the beach, even though the dog's covered in sand, you can still see him breathing. You can't really get a dog to hold its breath. Apparently they couldn't get, who was it? The guy that did the dog props for Lizard Woman's Skin. But, so then he puts it together that Ruth is the one that poisoned the dog. Because, he's talking to the butler, and the butler says, no one's touched his dish, lately. So he puts together the only thing he's had to eat or drink was when he licked those ice cubes, which Ruth brought the ice cubes out, even though Michelle made the cocktail, the martini, she brought the ice out. So he confronts her about the ice, but he thinks that she did that to protect Paul, because he's under the impression that she thought that Michelle was going to kill him out of jealousy. And the dog was just incidental because he happened to dump it out and he licked the ice cubes. But then that's when he brings Daniela in, and that's when they kind of go last house, because they're being very playful with each other, but taunting her about it. Like, oh, like, they'll be making out and kissing, and, oh, come on, be friendly with us, oh, come on, honey, don't you want to join in? And that's when she offers, how much money do you want just to get out of my life? And he says, I want you to admit that you killed your husband. And so then Daniela, who's reveling and tormenting her, is taking her pottery and some of her other fragiles and just smashing them when she won't answer. There's a scene where they come up to her in the bedroom, and there is a scene where Paul and Daniela are like kissing and making out, but they're out of focus, and behind them, like Ruth is laying in bed and they're in front of her, so it's like when they pull away, they're out of focus, and it's just her shocked, tormented face. I will say this half of the film, Analia Gade really shines with her acting. She's fine throughout, but I think she really did better as the tormented victim and eventual heroine. And so then finally, it all comes to the end where the inspector shows up and he says, we know your husband's death was not an accident. He was poisoned. And Paul and Danielle are kind of looking at her like, oh, really, officer? Do tell. But then when Ruth says, so, am I a suspect? The inspector goes, no, but he is. Paul's demeanor changes, and this is where the other twist plays in very well. And this I didn't see coming. I should have, but I didn't. And I thought it was very well done. Because, remember, the list that she gave him for the art supplies was after she overheard everything that was going on. And it found out that Michelle was poisoned with one of the items that she had him pick up, one of the chemicals. So he's trying to say, no, she told me to pick that up. It was for her pottery. They all say, you don't use that for pottery. And, he says, she gave me the list. And even the sort of hobby shop owner comes in and is like, yeah, that's the guy that bought that chemical, with a bunch of, sort of disguising it with a bunch of other pottery stuff. And he says, I bought them for her because she said she needed them. And he says, that's impossible. She just bought a whole summer's worth a few weeks ago. She has no need to come in here. He says, she gave me a list. They present the list, but when they show it to Ruth, she says, that's not my handwriting. So she played him. And then, of course, that's when it comes out. The inspector says, you've had several convictions in France. We know your background, your history. This fits in with stuff, this is your kind of MO. And I actually thought that the way Ruth looks, or the way Analia Gade looks during this scene, where you can tell she's just broken and beaten down and just done with everything. The way she's just looking up at everyone as they're standing and she's sitting, I thought she kind of looked like Camille Keaton, looked like an older Camille Keaton, which, she wasn't in Last House. She was in I Spit on Your Grave, but still. And so Paul and Daniela are then taken away, which this I still don't quite understand, but as they're taking him away, he turns and he sees Roland standing like down on the lawn. He's kind of looking up at him, and then Paul just starts laughing. Like, he looks at him, looks back at her, and then he starts laughing. I guess as if to say, maybe he thinks Roland is the one that tipped her off or helped her or whatever. It's never quite clear. But Roland, like, when she goes up to the window and listens to their plan, he's just laying in a hammock and just kind of watching her walk from one place. He's watching her listen. He kind of just lets everything happen and just watches. But then at the end, she walks the beach and he walks up behind her as if he's going to approach her. And then it ends. So yeah, I really like that ending, that they had this plan to kill her and make it look like an accident. That didn't work. They got fed up, so they were going to kill her and make it look like a suicide. But she was already a step ahead of them, so then she started, laying the groundwork to, not only kill her husband and make his partner, her new boyfriend, look like he did it. Very cleverly, I might add. So, yeah, I thought this was... I don't think I ever even got the writer's name for this, which I didn't mean to do at one point. Raphael Azcona, and the director, Jose Maria Fork. Again, if I pronounce that correctly. So yeah, I think it was well written. It does have moments of style, some neat camera work. I thought the acting was pretty well done, especially Gene Sorrell. It was kind of fun and neat to see him take on this more sinister, villainous role. Even if he is kind of more of like the taunty kind of David Hess. Not as extreme as David Hess, but the sort of kind of being a bully at one point. But see him take on that kind of role. But yeah, even though it's slow at times, I really enjoyed this, and I definitely think this movie deserves more recognition, more attention, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. So, The Fox with a Velvet Tail. I'm guessing the title is referring to, because there's no fox, but maybe it's Gene Sorrell. He's like a sly fox. Maybe his tail, velvet. Maybe that just sounds cool. But, maybe Paul is the sly fox, but then Ruth is even more sly because she outwits everyone. But yeah, I really dug this. So I have a few more Gialli to get to before I get to Argento films, and then I'm going to be going to Giallo inspired or tribute, homage, neo Giallo, more modern films. So stay tuned for those. And I have a couple more Italian horror films that I completely forgot about, like The Church. But anyway, so stay tuned for all those, and thank you for watching.